Why, hello everybody. My name is Steve Usher and a warm welcome to the Experienced Designers podcast. So I thought I'd just jump straight in today and introduce my next two guests, which is Emma Bridger and Belinda Ganaway, both based in the UK. They're going to introduce themselves in a moment anyway, so you get a bit more insight into them and their background. But I just wanted to share, right now, employee experience it's just a super exciting time to be around it, isn't it? Whether it's candidate experience, onboarding experience, whether it's then more kind of culture, leadership development, DE&I. It's a really amazing time around how we are talking about designing employee experiences, like intentionally designing. I mean, when have we ever really talked about intentionally designing around humans, i.e. employees? So I think just this angle that we're kind of going down right now, or where we're at, is really exciting. And so, I think for me, I just love supporting people who are also really trying to contribute to that industry, also trying to build the movement and educate people, because I think still we've got a lot of education to do just to remove some of the kind of designy words that are kind of out there right now, prototyping, design sprints, but just get it into a really simple narrative that people can consume and understand. And really, most importantly, is change our mindsets. The mindset shift is first and foremost above anything else. So when I saw that Emma and Belinda had written a book, which I'm hugely respectful of, around titled Employee Experience by Design, then absolutely I was really keen for them to join me on the show, where we can learn a little bit more about them and their background. And, it's interesting to see two different people from very different backgrounds who have absolutely very much kind of fallen in love with around the employee experience side and are really keen to make an impact and a difference in the world of work. So without further ado, I introduce you to Emma and Belinda. And as always, I really appreciate you listening and enjoy the show. Thank you. Belinda, Emma, welcome to the Experienced Designers.
Thank you very much.
Oh, in perfect, almost perfect unison. That was very good. Well synced. So if I may, Belinda, just a quick introduction into yourself and your background, and share a big passion of yours as well. That would be great to learn.
Great question. Can I go with the passion first? Otherwise I forget that. That's a really
always. Let's start with that one.
We've just been talking about, Emma knows where I'm going with this. She's going to yawn and go, oh, not the sea swimming. But this is a lockdown revelation, the sea swimming. I live in Hove, and the sea is absolutely full of a group of women of a certain age with their dry robes. So sea swimming and anything to do with the sea, very much a passion of mine. The more boring bit, my background, I started as a journalist, and I've been through sort of comms and marketing, digital transformation, and have ended up in this whole world of people and experience. So now I describe myself as a facilitator, team and systems coach, and I guess also a student of design thinking as well. I guess what the common thread to all of that is I like to ask an awful lot of questions. So it's nice to be on the receiving end.
Yeah, I think we're all students of design thinking for a long time. It's not just, I've learned it, got the certificate, thank you very much. It's a constant learning for sure. So Emma, how about yourself?
Hi, Steve. Nice to be here. Thanks for inviting us to join the podcast. So my background is, someone described me recently as a recovering academic, which I think is a really good description. So I started life as an academic in the field of psychology, positive psychology, although I didn't know that's what it was called back then. Fell into corporate world, did 10 years in-house in big corporates, really passionate about helping people to thrive at work, really, which we'll get into today. And then set up my company, People Lab, 10, 11 years ago to help companies, help people thrive at work, essentially. And my passion is music. So I used to play in bands back in the day. I grew up playing cornet in the brass band, local brass band in rural Shropshire, because there was nothing else to do. And that was a bit of a social life for me and my sister at the time. And then I joined a much cooler band when I was a student, and I played bass guitar. And so I love playing music. I love watching music. I love, going to gigs, going to clubs, listen to music. So that's my real passion. Yeah.
Amazing. And I don't know, I'm absolutely certain we would have heard that on the recording, but we also got authentic seagulls in the background in the Hove area, which is really great to hear. So look, but today, just out of interest, how did your paths cross? How did you both come together?
I'm looking at Emma. It's like a dating question. It's like, have we got the same answer? I I was introduced to
Or will
Emma.
we match? Oh,
Actually,
Yeah,
Emma, quickly write it down
yeah.
on a postcard and hold it up.
It's like a Mr. and Mrs. I think I was introduced to Emma many years ago when I was working at what was deemed to be the UK's first new media agency at the time. That's how long ago it was, social media agency, an agency called Nixon McInnes. And we were introduced by a mutual friend called Jenny, who I think there's a music connection there. Is that right, Emma?
yeah. So Jenny, I know Jenny's husband Ian really well because Ian's little brother Dave and we went out for years, and we were in the band together. It's all very amicable. It's all fine. My husband and Dave are good friends. So yeah, so I went out with Dave through the rest of my 20s. He's a brilliant drummer. He played in Corner Shop actually, bit of a plug there, and he was in our band as well. And that's how I knew Ian and Jenny. Small world, serendipity, and we met through Jenny, I think, didn't we?
We did.
Amazing. And now you're on this kind of EX journey as well together, which is
Exactly.
awesome. So look, can I just let's just kind of talk about EX or employee experience for a moment. So I just wanted to ask you, like, what do you see in the movement right now? What are you hearing? What are you thinking? Like, what's the junction we're in right now?
So I'll take this one. I think there's two things. Well, there's lots of things going on. I think I'll take the sort of the downside first. I think there is potentially a risk of a bit of EX washing. So we have seen in recent months and years people sort of changing job titles or changing agency descriptions or whole function names and just simply inserting EX where it used to be internal comms or HR or engagement or whatever. And I think there's a risk with that, which is it might be doing this whole world of experience and deeply thinking about experience and the components of experience and designing better experiences. I think there's a risk that they might be doing a disservice to that world and undermining the value potentially of that. I think it's a small risk, but I think it's there. On the upside, definitely that's coincided with the pandemic. There's focus on the human experience of work and of the human experience of connectedness within organizations and the empathy that's needed to understand and work with that, with people in all of their guises, in all parts of their lives, I think is absolutely on the agenda across the board, from leaders to HR teams to IC to everybody. So I think empathy really is the word of the year. And I think that has got to be a good thing for employee experience.
Yeah, agree. I think I've also I would definitely support that. I think if I've been kind of doing a quick kind of Boolean search on LinkedIn over the last couple of years, just by employee experience in titles, for an example, and there's been a huge uplift of people kind of inserting those two words into their job titles. But I think you're right, and I would say I'd probably maybe turn that dial up slightly, Belinda, in terms of, I think you've been polite. But I think we need to call that out. And I think there's probably a research piece there to be undertaken to really understand, like, what are those roles, what sits underneath them, how are organizations really constructing that kind of EX, whether it's as a function or whether it's as a mindset or both, and how they're evolving those. So I think that's a really valid point to raise there for sure. What do you see, like, in if you kind of think about it as a journey and as a movement, Emma, how would you describe, like, the evolution? Like, where are we in this kind of evolution right now? You know, you've done some research over the last kind of 10 years and you've been you've been very much intrinsically involved in, from a research point of view. What have you seen and learned from that work that you've been doing and how that evolution is unfolding?
Yeah, so the research that we've done has very specifically looked into what a great experience looks like for people, which sounds like a really simple question, but there's very little that exists that explores that. So, making the link to positive psychology, which I think is a really interesting kind of, merging of positive psychology and design thinking using, the best bits of both, really. We've spent sort of 10 years asking, people in organisation, when you're having a great experience at work, what's it look like? What's it feel like? What's going on for you? Tell us a story about it. So collected qualitative data from probably thousands of people from all over the world. And for years, I've kind of wanted to interrogate that. So normally we kind of, we would use that kind of conversation with an organisation we're working with to understand what good looks like, and then say, okay, so really simply, this is what's happening when your people are at their best, having a great experience. How near or far are we from that? What do we need to do? Pretty simple stuff. But I've never really looked at the whole data set. So great opportunity last year, lockdown happened. And so we thought, actually, we've got some time. Let's have a look at this, this amazing kind of data set we've got. And went through it. There's a lot to go through, and kind of pulled out some universal themes of engagement and experience, if you like. Whatever you choose, whatever label you choose to give it, basically, there are some universal themes that are present when people are having a positive experience at work. And they link to a lot of the psychology that's out there. So, for example, meaning features. We've talked about meaning. Viktor Frankl talked about man's search for meaning. Meaning's featured for many years. Purpose is big business at the moment. So it's no surprise that, people talk about meaning being present. But I think what's really interesting is differentiating between that purpose with a big P versus small p. So people finding meaning in their own way. So whatever is useful and relevant for them. So it came out with the research with the kind of a number of universal themes. So we looked at meaning, appreciation was in there. Let's see if I can remember them all now. Growth, the ability to have some kind of personal growth, ability to have some kind of impact, autonomy featured, challenge featured. I think that was all of them.
Connection,
human connection, of course. But I think that the real takeaway is that that's only ever half of the story. That there are, yes, universal themes that feature, whether you're talking to people in China or Oman or the US, wherever you're talking to people. But equally, there are individual differences. So you cannot make assumptions about what a great experience looks like for people. You have to allow them to share their views and their stories with you, because it really, there's a real difference between both from organisation to organisation, and then from team to team, and then from individual to individual. So some people, for example, will talk about, it was a great experience because it was fun and I love the people I work with, and it was work hard, play hard. There was a really big social aspect of, I never knew what's going to happen the next week, a sense of adventure. Whereas other people might say, I knew exactly what was expected of me. There was a really clear brief. They won't mention the social aspect and the fun aspect. So you cannot make assumptions about what good looks like for people.
Yeah.
So that in a nutshell is the research.
I think also, with just commenting on that, I think, experiences are inherently personal. You and I can go to a same coffee shop with the same coffee or latte, but we'll have two very different experiences, and obviously they're very personal. And I think there's a kind of you can argue to say, well, can you design an experience? And of course you can, but I don't think you can cover everyone. But you can certainly design it to maximize as many as you possibly can, and to deliver an experience for as many people as you possibly can, or certainly have the ingredients to allow an experience to foster however that's going to then be perceived. Is that something else? Is that something you've also share or you've noticed in the research?
Yeah, I think this is where the psychology, it's great to kind of, as I said, merge the best bits of psychology, positive psychology, and design thinking, because, we talk about, experiences at the most basic level. It's something that happens. It makes you feel something, good, bad, or ugly. Therefore, thinking about that from a kind of an individual perspective has to feature, because. And then this is where it kind of marries really well with design thinking, because at the heart of design thinking, as we know, is, a need to be empathic and to really understand the person we're designing for. And I think this is where the sort of marriage of positive psychology and design thinking really comes into its own, because I think in our world, we're looking at employee experiences and how to help people thrive at work. Therefore, designing, using positive psychology to help you genuinely empathize and understand the people you're designing for, with the kind of, I guess, the objective of helping them to thrive. So it's about helping them to experience a better level of well-being, which fits with employee experience. I think is a great sort of marriage with those different ideas and disciplines. I know there's some debate about, whether that would work if you're designing from a customer experience. We would obviously argue it would, but there are examples where you might be designing a customer experience which doesn't result in increased levels of thriving and well-being. But I think from an internal point of view, from an employee experience point of view, absolutely that is your starting point. So it kind of makes complete sense to us to kind of, merge those different ideas and disciplines.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So I just want to touch on something. So, Just tell us a little bit like a grounding or an introduction to positive psychology. Let's break it out from the PP to the design thinking. So tell us a little bit about positive psychology. What is it? How does it work? What's the structure?
It's really simple. So positive psychology for me is an umbrella term. It's not actually anything new. We've been, using positive psychology as psychologists for years. Like I said, go back to the work of Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, look at the work of Carl Rogers. These are all people who have looked at how do we enable humans to thrive and live their best lives. But it was coined by Martin Seligman in, I think it was 1998. He's kind of the grandfather of positive psychology, if you like. So it's coined by him as a term for a conference he was kind of curating. And that was kind of the kickstart of the whole positive psychology movement. And in a nutshell, it's about taking a strength-based approach. So psychologists very often look at, what's wrong and how can we fix it. So, someone's got a problem, they need help. That's all completely valid. Nothing wrong with that. It's only ever half the story. And positive psychology, for me, is really about sort of saying, well, what's good look like and how can we get more of it? So it's about taking a strength-based approach at its most simple level. There's obviously a lot of nuances in there, but that for me is kind of a succinct way of explaining how I view positive psychology.
Yeah. Positive psychology, though, Belinda, I'll ask you this one. So right now, I mean, it's quite tough for people to be positive, quite frankly, right now. We're in this real midst of, in the workplace, this shift to home working, all of these, school, obviously homeschooling, all of these really big challenges. How do you see this kind of impacting the workplace right now, or people generally from a psychology point of view? Or positive psychology point of view?
Yeah, I suppose the way that we use it in our work is by combining it as a philosophy, if you like, as a methodology, and borrowing some of the tools from positive psychology and interweaving them with some of the tools from design thinking in order to create better experiences. So we're not sort of setting out to say, right, everybody needs to be positive and all of that stuff. It's all about understanding what constitutes a great experience for people and how can we enable more of that to happen. And I think there are some really strong common threads between positive psychology and design thinking. I mean, design thinking is obviously inherently rooted in optimism, that it's possible to find out what is going on for people and then to realize opportunities to make that stuff better. Obviously in our world, we're focusing on people's experience at work. So I think, those common thread is really, really strong. I think also what positive psychology offers this approach to employee experience is also, as Emma said, it's a strength-based approach. It's not a deficit-based approach. So we're starting at the point that everything isn't broken. There is stuff that is working. So actually, how do we take more of that and apply the lessons from that to create more of those great experiences? So if you take the pandemic experience, it would be really easy to assume that it's universally dreadful for people, but actually for a lot of people, I mean, it is obviously for a lot of people, it has been absolutely catastrophic on many, many levels. But actually for those of us who have been privileged enough to shift from an office space to a home space, who are not commuting and spending more time with our kids, it's actually been really, really positive. So I think, as I say, what positive psychology offers is just this ability to look for what is working and then ask the question, how can we create more of that? On a really, really practical level, we've taken some of these themes and learnings from positive psychology to slightly adjust or adapt, if you like, some of the design thinking principles. And I guess the most evident one is probably two things that we do. And we talk about this a lot, this EX design framework in a new book that we've just got out. But we do two specific things in there, I think, which really sort of weave these two things together. So one, which is we change, it's all about language, right? We change the problem space to the opportunity space. So that diamond where we seek to understand more about the human need and what is needed, we simply reframe the language to ask, what could we achieve here? What's the opportunity to improve the experience here? So that's a really simple mindset shift and a language shift. And the other thing we do is we actually add a third diamond up front. into what most people would recognize as the design thinking framework. And this is where we're much more explicit about what we're doing in that first instance. It's where we actually ask the question. It's almost like this sort of the scoping bit that people, or the exploration of the constraints bit that people would understand from design thinking. We make that really explicit. And as well as asking what the constraints are, so, what does the work need? What does the organization need? And what do people need? We actually then ask the question, what does good look like here? What's the big picture here? What are we trying to achieve? What does a great employee experience look like in this organization? So we've added in that third diamond right up front to acknowledge that for a lot of organizations, that's a really useful place to start. It's not the place that every organization or every team will start. But I think by adding that third diamond, we're taking a really positive, strategic lens to the big picture issues before we dive in.
Yeah. And where do you see... where do you see some of the challenges? So if we talk about, applying, some of these frameworks and these mindsets, so we'll talk about both because they kind of very much link. So the mindset and the frameworks. What's some of the challenges? What are you seeing in terms of applying this into the organizational context? What's some of the key challenges that you see in applying this stuff and getting starting and creating the movement internally?
Yes. So I'll start, and then I'll let Emma pick up. Interestingly, as part of the research process we've been going through, we've been phenomenally lucky to speak to some amazing heads of EX around the world. And we've actually managed to put together this little sort of like EX design club where we're checking in with real practitioners on a daily basis, not a daily basis, on a really regular basis, to see actually what's happening for them.
That's a good service.
It's an amazing service. Sign up now.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. We're thinking about them on a daily basis, clearly. So that's been a really great source of inspiration. Some of the things that I see, it's all context specific, right? Different organizations start in different teams, different individuals even start in different places. And sometimes this is a side of desk project for one individual working in a more traditional HR team. Other places there's a whole EX team. But where this stuff gets stuck, I think, is the theatre and the language of design thinking can be really, I was going to say nauseating, that's probably a little bit strong. It can be really off-putting for a lot of people. So just being really, really aware.
Call it out. What say how it is, Belinda. Say how it is. Come on, let's call it out. Come on, you're being polite again.
We love it. We've gone native, but
it's nauseating.
It can, and it can be really off-putting.
It can.
And it can really deter potential collaborators. So, language is really, really important. So speaking the language of the business, both in terms of, what you're trying to achieve, but also how you're going to get there as well. So, if you don't need to talk in terms of brainstorms and ideations and artifacts and all of that, don't use that language. I can't remember who it was I was talking to, but they said they just talk in the language of, I know, as a US tech company, so they're actually really familiar with these constructs anyway. But the head of EX there, he was saying that actually he talks about being in the problem-solving business. So he goes up and finds what needs fixing, and then he's got a series of, an approach that allows him to collaborate to solve those problems. That would be my starting point. I've got lots more in terms of where this stuff gets stuck, but I think that for me would be the starting point.
It's interesting because design thinking is problem solving, which in its own terms suggests it's negative. There's a problem, correct? Is my initial thought, So I think bringing the positive psychology, looping this back in, I think is a really good. It's a good angle, and I think it's a really credible way to approach it. Because also, if you do things like let's just take a normal kind of journey mapping process, and you kind of you've created a journey map and you see the various touch points. There's always that natural tendency to look at where the negatives are, look at where the negative emotions are or whatever. But I also say, like, where's the peak moments? And then how can you pull that peak moment out? And how can we make that even better? Like, how can we really develop that as a really shifting kind of experience that might then become your future marketing? And then that might be the moment that people share a lot more externally if you're looking to attract more talent, as an example. So I think I totally see where you're bringing this together. can I just let's I just want to kind of recoil slightly on the piece around from an organization, because I think if I just give you some context, so I think we're still kind of in many organizations, particularly like large scale enterprise level, there's a very small number of organizations who are, I guess, kind of, aligning the EX into the HR operating model or people operating model. So where do you see that's like some of how do we get past some of this kind of hierarchical, siloed, or industrial type era that still lots of organizations are steeped in and, still very much kind of struggling? Where's the start point for these types of organizations, just to kind of give us a sense of starting this movement and moving them into this journey and really shifting ultimately this kind of, the internal workings of the organization into a much more human-centric approach?
Yeah, I'll flip to Emma to answer this one. I think sorry to go back to the book, but when we will get
to the book.
I know, I'm sorry. I promise I'm not really.
That's all right. That's all right. Plug it.
Our starting point was democratizing EX. What we saw in the literature and the conferences and so on, that EX was very much spoken about in the context of very specific types of organizations. So typically, knowledge-based workers at the time working in lovely offices, or now working, with the privilege of having a home office to work in and the flexibility to do that. But we wanted to democratize this, and I won't steal Emma's thunder, but we talk about people working on oil rigs and in porter cabins and car parks. Actually, why shouldn't they have a great employee experience too? But that idea of democratizing it, sort of moving beyond the industrialized kind of view of people do what they're told and they'll be happy to have a job, to actually, what does it look like to create a great experience and why? I think there's the psychology really stacks up, or the impact of creating a great experience absolutely stacks up to make the business case. Emma, do you want to expand on that? I've done a really bad job of introducing that as a concept.
I think, there's not a straightforward answer as you'd expect. No, I think it's speaking the language of the business and find the way in, the route in, and there's lots of different ways to find a route in. But I've got a great piece in the first chapter of the book from a company called Asta, who are in the social housing sector. So not a company you traditionally associate with EX, really. Like Bea said, it's very often the kind of the tech companies, the shiny brands that kind of go there first. And I think, sometimes go back to the language piece, we are about democratizing EX, and we are about making it accessible for people, because this is the right thing to do. And we need to do that in a way that's going to work for them. And the design thinking language does put people off, and I'll put my hands up. Like every time, we talk about artifacts, I have to kind of go, what's that again? And I think I'm hugely passionate about plain English. And I think that, as a recovering academic, one of my big areas of kind of frustration is the gap between the world of academia and organizational, real life, and the fact that what we know to be true from all the research doesn't seem to find its way into the real world. So, for example, there's still a $1 billion industry that focuses on giving employees perks and thinks that's how you engage people and give them a great experience. And we know that doesn't work, right? And yet there's, I won't go into that. So I think it's like speaking the language of the organisation. Find as our friend Sarah from the CIPD would say, the Trojan mice. Find the little ways you can make a difference. Some companies love the language; they love that they're part of this kind of tribe, and they'll lap it up. Other companies, you just don't even mention positive psychology or design thinking. You just say, "Okay, we think we've got a great way forward for helping you achieve this, and here's what we think we can do." I tend to find that. As you guys, I'm sure, will agree. Once you're able to allow people to go through the process using the tools that we use from design thinking, positive psychology, people have such a great experience in itself. It's a very kind of a positive experience, and people really come alive and say, "Wow, that was really brilliant. I really enjoyed that. I get it now." But you kind of have to walk them through it for them to. It's like walking by doing, isn't it?
Yeah.
You have to let them experience it themselves. So. Sorry, slightly rambling answer there, but the final point is I was talking about the company that we work with. So I shan't mention the brand. They're a huge company, but the bit of the business we're working with, they make cast iron pipes in a foundry in the Midlands, and they're not traditionally a company you think of really focusing on EX. And everyone goes, technology is really important. I had this debate with someone recently. technology has to feature. And I'm like, for that company, technology is not at the moment and probably never will be, even on the radar for their employees. They come to work, they go to the foundry, they don't have company mobiles, they don't have company laptops. They use posters and they get together in the mess room to have updates. And that's not going to change anytime soon. Now, whether that's right or wrong, but there's this overemphasis on the kind of the knowledge workers, the shiny offices, the jelly bean bars, the great tech. But there's so many businesses that are micro businesses, people trimming lettuces in barns for, agriculture and, people making cast iron pipes. They also deserve a great experience. So I think that's part of what we wanted to achieve with the book, is to say it doesn't have to be just in the realms of the knowledge workers. It should be accessible to all.
Yeah. Did you have you come across David McLeod, the work that David did with the engagement stuff, Engage for Success? And I don't know, because he did 2 pieces of research that for both governments, and I remember he was saying, from an engagement point of view, I remember his research showed, I think it was post the financial crisis, 2009, and he was saying like all we needed was like a 3% uplift on engagement scores, and we wouldn't be in recession. Also, it was something. Yeah. And it was, and he mentioned panel beaters as an HSBC in the same arena, and said actually these panel beaters were, from an engagement point of view, were highly engaged group of people.
Absolutely.
So it's a it transcends all of this, or any organization. And so no, very cool stuff. And I think I think we're running it now from less of an engagement, but more around kind of experience for sure. Can I just ask, just from the companies that you've worked with, how are you seeing companies set up EX from a resource point of view? Where are you seeing the budgets kind of going? We talked about maybe these role changes or title changes, but fundamentally the companies that perhaps are investing in EX, how are they setting up? How are they aligning their resource to this movement?
Yeah, it's so context specific. So
it varies.
So you've got it's interesting. Organizations with a sort of a strong design orientation already kind of get it. And they are much more likely to be creating actually a standalone EX design team. And I've seen those teams shift from being, within HR to actually stand alone. And one global bank we were talking to actually said, their shift out of HR into more of a standalone, almost like an innovation lab type of thing, has worked really, really well for them, because, it's allowed them to work in that really agile way with bringing multiple skills into the team so they can actually crack through new innovations really, really quickly. So that is happening, but I would say that's very much at the leading edge of organizations doing this. And so on the whole, in the sort of the middle maturity bit, if you like, what we're seeing is sort of more traditional HR teams driving collaboration across a wider team. So HR and IC coming together, for instance, coming together with IT, coming together with, so that's either sort of in permanent sort of functional reorgs, if you like. I'm thinking of one US company I was just speaking to where they brought IC and design and HR together in that way, or on a sort of project by project basis. So that's happening. And so that's sort of focusing on specific programs and outcomes. And that's where the funding is coming from that. And that so often starts with onboarding. And again, I think it probably would have done anyway, because, the cost of having people that don't hit the ground running is really high, or the cost of having people that leave you within the first 6 months, having spent all that money to recruit them, is really high. So often organizations start there. It's also a great place to start because because it's not necessarily owned by any one team. It necessarily requires people to collaborate across functions. So it creates a lot of learning in the process of focusing there as well. And then, in other instances, as I've said, it's sometimes just a side project, a side of desk project that individuals or, a couple of people within a certain bit of an organization are taking on, and then manage to find some money down the back of the sofa to support focusing on a small Trojan mice type of project. So in lots of different ways, but I think the most advanced tend to have EX teams that are either slightly separate to sort of the traditional HR team, or they've genuinely made that sort of HR transformation. So it's more of an EX focus, working in a really agile way.
Yeah. There's interestingly this year, I don't know if you've noticed it, there's been a real push on narrative around the future of HR, and it's kind of been coming, isn't it? You got, my next guest is Lars Schmidt from the US, who's got literally launched a book called Redefining HR. You've got Damien Diener, of course, who's the head of EX at IBM. I mean, they shared a great piece around HR 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. How do you, if you were to, I'm just thinking about your book and the construct of your book. I think applying that into like enabling a proportion of a large HR function and giving them these skills and this mindset and this knowledge, I think could be incredibly powerful for any organization. Emma, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we've, where do we start? We've got some work to do, haven't we? Because I like you said, I think going back to B's original comments at the start, I think you were quite kind there, B, about the size of the of the task here. What we've seen is that a lot of organisations that we work with are just relabeling. We're now people experience. We've got a people experience team. They're still just doing what they did before. And we're actually looking at this kind of maturity model, and we kind of have this idea of going from kind of transactional to transformational, if you like, and what does that look like, and the journey that that HR is going on. And actually, Jacob Morgan's got some great stuff in his book about the kind of the journey that HR has been on. But I think the next step is going to be a paradigm shift for HR, because it's genuinely going to be about collaborative working, Mark Levy, he contributed to the book, and actually Sally Damon, and great conversations with them. They were able to do some really exciting, things in their organizations because they had the permission to do that. I think a lot of organizations, still see HR as there to kind of fix the people stuff that goes wrong, despite where we've come from and where, what you read. I think the reality, having worked in-house for many years, is that we've got a long way to go. I think it really starts with, as we said, it's the small steps, isn't it? It's the starting to experiment, like taking a design thinking approach to this. It's the Trojan mice, sorry, not the horses, the mice. And trying, I think the easy place to start is trying it out on specific projects, discrete projects, rather than looking at the end-to-end experience, because that's so huge. And I think we tend to find that people we work with get very overwhelmed quite quickly by that, in terms of, wow, it's everything. I need everybody in the room to help me solve this. So I think starting small and getting those wins in really helps to kind of move that forwards. But I think we can't underestimate the size of the shift here. And it is a big shift. And I think Josh Brissin as well is talking a lot about this and commentating a lot on this, and some really great stuff coming out from him as well. But I think it's really exciting as well, putting my positive psychology mindset on. It's a really exciting time.
It's amazing.
I think as we're seeing, the people coming through who are much more open to these new ways of working.
Yeah. I think I totally agree. I think the fact that we are even talking about employee experience design and how we purposefully design that, I think just that narrative on its own, we're in a place now where we are actually having these conversations. I know there's a lot of, going back to your earlier point, I think, there's a lot of, there's lacking a bit of substance in some of this, but I think it's just part of the evolution. I think we'll see more and more value. Yeah. Can I just one thing I wanted to ask you, because this is also, again, I know it's super contextual. I mean, I love the fact you said it several times, because I always look at any organization and think of them as a canvas, and then each canvas you got different, huge amounts of kind of cultural context. You've got the process, all of these things. But I think one of the things that I find and I've seen is particularly when this adopting kind of the various modes of a design process is, the upfront work around the research, the empathy, moving into insights, etc. And those bits I found always tend to be a little bit easier. I think where it gets a little bit tougher, particularly when you're doing it first time, is where you get into kind of ideation, prototyping, and testing, and that can be a bit tricky, because in some organizations or in some cultures, the failure part isn't really it's seen as a failure. So again, going back to this kind of negative, using the positive psychology, that actually, no, the failure and it not working is a positive thing, not a negative. What do you see? Have you come across that at all? What's your thoughts, Emma? I saw you also.
I mean, I've just what I would say is, and let me give her view in a sec. It goes back to psychological safety. You know, again, it's that lip service, like it's okay to innovate and fail. Is it really though? Is it really? We've all been in organisations where, you know, they say the right things, but there's a lack of integrity. Going back to David McLeod's stuff as enabler of engagement, the lack of integrity. So you're telling me that I can, you know, try things out and test things and get it wrong. But the reality is, if that happens, then I've got a black mark against my name. So I think it goes back to, how do you create a culture, genuinely create a culture of psychological safety, would be my take on that. And I think that going back to the point about the process, I must admit, in my experience, I've found the innovation and prototype testing makes a lot more sense to the people that we work with, because they get that bit. It's the beginning bit. The scoping piece is always, and the empathy piece is always the bit that is far more challenging, because 9 times out of 10, you know, we'll work with people who think that they've got a problem they want to solve. And once you start to interrogate the brief a bit, you realise they don't really know why they're doing it or what they're doing or what it is they want to do. They'll, you know, and they'll go, and it takes quite a lot of work to really unpick that and help them to understand what it is they're going after and why. And then the empathy piece as well. I think, you know, companies wouldn't think twice about spending, you know, hundreds of thousands of pounds on customer research. But the minute you suggest spending a bit of time talking to their people, it's like, well, no, we've already got that data. We don't need any more. It's like, well, there's a bit of data, but we don't really, you know, we need to kind of go and some stuff we don't know, we need to know here. And there's a real reluctance to do that piece. And we've actually got a great guest on our research show today talking about what we can use from user experience and customer experience. And she wrote a piece for the book, and she's a customer experience professional. She was talking about, you know, in her world, it's quite hard to speak to the end user. You have to put a lot of effort in. And in our world, we work with them. So it should be really easy. And yet we're still really bad at it. And I thought it was a brilliant challenge from her. She was Kerry Hughes, and she works for a consultancy called Spark that you might have heard of. But it's a great challenge, because I think we're really bad at it. We don't invest in it. And yet we work with all these people. We've got ready access to them, and we still don't really take time to do that. So I think that would be my, again, bit of a ramble there, but my reflection on what you know, your thoughts there. I'm sure, B, you've got some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, loads. I guess in brief, interesting that you say that you find that people are happier in the kind of exploratory, finding things out, empathy, you know, the opportunity space. Actually, I think what we find is that people tend to want to zoom forward into that. I've got an idea, let's do this. That could be the nature of the teams that we work with. They're IC or HR, and they're used to solving problems and solving them really quickly. I think, Emma, you've just said this. So actually getting them to slow down and stay in that solution space, say in the opportunity space, is sometimes where we have to put a lot of effort. So that's an interesting one. So getting people to be really cognizant and comfortable about wandering around there and stepping into people's shoes and all the stuff that we know that we need to do. And there's also, I think I might oversimplify this greatly, but I struggle a little bit with the question that you asked about, the fear of failure, and, you know, the idea that it's okay, should be okay to fail. And that language kind of takes me back, I don't know, is it 10 years, and everybody used to fetishize Facebook and the move fast and break things posters, you know, that everybody used to have on their conference talks 10 years ago. But for me, I think I oversimplify, but for me, it's not about prototyping. Oh, it worked. Oh, it didn't work. Prototyping only doesn't work if you don't learn something. So the whole point of prototyping is simply to communicate an idea well enough as to learn something about, you know, either your end user or the opportunity that you're trying to resolve. So the only real failure is if you don't learn something. So this idea that prototyping is binary, yes, it worked, no, it didn't, I find a bit problematic. Feels like a much bigger conversation, and I probably oversimplify. But for me, prototyping is about learning. Yeah.
Well, I think this is some of the dangers with design thinking, is that people are seeing it as this kind of step-by-step, linear, isolated. It's not, less kind of iterative. So it's, it's interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's jump into the book, because we're definitely I'd love to just
did we
learn a
mention
little
we've
bit.
got a book?
Yeah, a couple of times. Can I just out of interest, because I'm hugely respectful of people who, because it's a lot of energy. And I've got a friend, Katrina Collier, who wrote a book called The Robot Proof Recruiter, and she still hates her keyboard to this day. So I just wanted to ask, what kind of prompted the book? What made you kind of, delve into the EX design and to share this out and put it together? Emma?
Shall I go? I'll go.
Go for it.
So I talking about Dave McLeod, actually. So he's a good friend of mine. So I wrote a book previously to this one on employee engagement, and I was actually involved in the engagement success movement from the beginning. And I wrote the engagement book like 5 years ago and did a second edition, and said I would never write a book again because I hated it. Same thing, and I'm not a natural writer, and I found it really hard work. But then when B and I started working together a few years ago and developing our ideas and testing things out and, thinking this through and running public courses, I sort of said to B, I think there's a book in this. And it really, it came from that passion to, want to, as she said, want to democratise this, to get this out there so people can do this for themselves. And yes, of course, it's nice when people bring us in to work with them. We love that. But we really want to genuinely make the world of work a better place for people. And again, goes back to that passion of mine about taking the research that we know works, like you talked about, peak experiences before, peak end rule, a classic example, some great research, some great neuroscience, some great evidence-based practice from design thinking that we know works. People aren't really using it. People are still kind of sticking to these models that come from off the shelf that say, if you do these 3 things, you'll have a great experience, which is absolutely not how it works. It has to be bespoke to your organisation. So there's a real passion and energy from my point of view to say, we've got some stuff that we know that works really well, and we've got some expertise and knowledge, and I wanted to share that. And I sort of approached B and said, I've spoken to my publisher and kind of tentatively shared this idea with them, and they just grabbed hold of it straight away and said, yeah, we'd love to do that. So I approached B and said, would you co-author with me? Because A, I can't write a book on my own again. And B, I think, our skill sets are really complementary, and B is far more skilled and expertise in design thinking than I am. So it just made sense to co-author it. So that's kind of how it came about.
Belinda, what was your experience? This is your first book?
It is my first book. Well, it's my first business book. I've written a couple of really dreadful novels that are sitting on hard drives somewhere. So my background, I started my working life as a journalist. So I suppose that kind of the writing bit was easier. And without blowing smoke up anybody's backside, it was delight working with Emma, because she's got just this wealth of experience and insight. And the other thing that was just tremendous is that I decided to take a really journalistic approach to my bit of the writing, and that meant asking lots of questions of lots and lots of practitioners. So we had that really broad pool of insight to draw on, and people were just so unbelievably welcoming and helpful and collaborative. So actually, it was just, and writing half a book is probably, just thinking of Katrina's experience, writing half a book is probably a lot easier than writing a whole one. Yeah. But yeah, it was great. Really lucky with my co-author and all of our contributors who've just been incredible.
Yeah. So what would you say, would you want people to take the most from the book for those that buy and read through? What would, if you had to encapsulate it, what are you trying to impart, the biggest lesson or words you're trying to impart on people?
So there's 2 things. One, which is, just because you're not doing employee experience design doesn't mean that your people aren't having an experience of being employed by you. So, don't think that by not engaging with this stuff that it's okay, because they will be having an experience. It just may well not be the experience that is right for them and is right for the organisation and the work. So that's my first sort of big picture bit. I suppose my key takeout would be just have a go. There is some big picture stuff, and there's some tools to support you, but we try not to be prescriptive, and you can't break this stuff. Find some allies, find some collaborators, get deep and dirty into actually what people you need to work with your people, and just try some of this stuff out. That would be hopefully if people took anything from the book, that's what they would take. That's what I would want anyway.
Yeah. Emma, how about yourself?
I think for me, it comes back to if you get it right with your people, it benefits everybody. So why wouldn't you do this? It's just so obvious, but the research stacks up as well. Get it right with your people. And I think, it disappoints me when I hear people that have, rubbish experiences at work, and we've all had them, we've all been there. It doesn't have to be that way. It shouldn't be. Everybody benefits, the individual, the customer, the business. It impacts positively on everything. So why wouldn't you do that? It's my first piece, I suppose. And secondly, I think it doesn't have to be really difficult. We've got some really great tools in there, like something as simple as a best experience activity, which I've used for years, which is taken from appreciative inquiry, which is a horrible name for something using positive psychology, but it's basically sort of says, just ask your people, tell me about a time when you loved being at work, from today or whenever, and just listen from that story. It's the most simple activity, and every time we run it, the energy in the room goes up and people love doing it. And there's this light bulb moment where people reflect on what they've come out with, and guess what? It isn't pay, it isn't great coffee, it isn't a jelly bean bar. It's the intrinsic stuff, which is, I felt valued, I had some meaning, basic stuff. And I think that I genuinely believe people have a right to that at work, and why wouldn't you do it? And it doesn't have to be difficult. So those are my kind of key takeaways. And the last one would be, it isn't a one size fits all. There's not an off the shelf model, and any consultant that tells you they have a model for this, and I know I've shared our Magica model, it winds me up, because it has to be bespoke to your organisation, your people. And that's the model that I share from the research. There's 50% of it is some themes, but the other 50% is it go and find out from your people.
Yeah.
So that would be my key takeaway.
Emma, I love that. I absolutely love it, because I think there's this. I've seen it in the market. I'm seeing it happen with suppliers, and I think, for me, it's please stop finding benchmarks. Stop being obsessed with external benchmarks and saying, that makes me feel really comfortable that I'm measuring a 7 and they're a 10.
Yes.
It's you know what, with and this is around the core thing of human centricity is just focus your energy on the most captive audience you probably have. From a relationship level, and probably in a building point of view, everybody's in the same building. If that's how it's set up, they're your most captive audience. Like, you've got the perfect user group to just start listening and start really getting into and understanding them more and more. So I totally agree. Why just do it? Just start there. Yeah, totally agree. Love that. So where can the audience find you? What's the best way for people to connect with you and chat? I think you have your own podcast as well. You have another podcast as well. Just share it all out. What do you got? How can we engage with you?
So we run a fortnightly podcast, sort of live show as well, called The Reset Show. That happens today, actually. But yeah, I think the best place to find that is probably People Lab website, which is www.peoplelab.co.uk, and contact me. I'm on Twitter, Emma People Lab. I'm on Instagram as People Lab, and my email is emma@peoplelab.co.uk. So that makes it very simple for you.
Easy. Love it.
I think I am the only Belinda Ganaway on the internet. So if you search me, you should probably find me. I'm definitely on LinkedIn. So my Ganaway's got 2 N's for nut. I'm on Twitter. I'm B-E-E Ganaway on Twitter.
Amazing. And the book is available on Amazon or any other sources?
All good.
Amazon,
all good booksellers.
All good book
resellers.
Good, and I will put some links. I will put some links in the show notes as well, so people can obviously access that, and we'll share it out. So awesome. So Emma, Belinda, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a real pleasure, and thank you for sharing. Your perspectives on EX, and I think the positive psychology element angle and that kind of that lens from it, and then applying it into DT is a really interesting one. So I wish you all the best of luck with the book and making a difference in the world of work going forward.
It's been a blast. Great to talk to you. Thank you for having us.
You're welcome. Take care. And there you have it, another episode of The Experienced Designers. Thank you so much to my guests, Emma and Belinda. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. As always, if you want to connect in, all links are available in the show notes, as well as links to where you can buy the book. or indeed certainly have a look and see what it's all about and make your own decision. You know, you're adults out there. So, but I wish you both best of luck and thank you again for your time. In the next episode, we have the amazing Lars Schmidt from the US. Some of you may be aware of Lars. If not, Lars is a industry or HR industry giant. Really great guy. He's contributed a lot to the industry and continues to do so. And I'm super excited to talk actually about his book. It's all about books at the moment, which is around redefining HR. So a hot topic right now. Where does the future of HR lie? What are those two words? Are they even going to exist in the future? Human resources? Probably not, but it needs to evolve one way or the other. So that's something we're definitely going to talk about. So look, thank you ever so much for listening as always. Until the next time, bye for now.